and I am the Reverend Eric Meter, the Associate Minister here. We are so happy to have you with us tonight. This is what democracy looks like.
If folks could raise their hands who are familiar with First UU, folks who are familiar with First UU, all right, talk to those folks if you want to learn more about what we are about here and who we are. We are so grateful to see so many faces here this evening, and thank you so much. Please feel free to come by and check us out some other time too outside of tonight.
Thank you.
Yes.
And I'm on the leadership team of Indivisible Ohio 12. And a legal disclaimer that I'm here in a personal capacity, not representing my employer. So I want to say a few things about Indivisible. Indivisible is a nationwide movement to stop the Trump agenda. With one goal: speak up about what we want and what we don't want to see happen in our country. We are patriots and only want what's best for our country. These last few weeks, along this journey with you all, I have just felt so patriotic, probably more patriotic than I've ever felt in my life. So I hope that you will stand up with me if you're able and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. They have a pretty detailed plan for taking away the protections of the ACA, but they haven't shared the nitty-gritty practical details of their secret replacement plan. Tonight and tomorrow, which we'll get to in a minute, we, along with Indivisible members around the country, hope to use our voices to shape this process. As most of you know, John Russell started a petition asking for a town hall about the Affordable Care Act about the same time that this group started, with 50 people up at the old Worthington Library just a few weeks ago. Look at us now. We have over 2,500 people in our Facebook group and almost 1,200 people on our email list. Over 1,800 people, when I last checked, have signed the petition for a town hall. But Pat Tiberi refuses to hold a town hall. He says that he prefers to meet with his constituents in small groups. He meets with groups of 4 to 5 people for about 30 minutes. At that rate, by my calculations, and I'm not an expert, he wouldn't have time to do anything else for a month if he met with all 1,800 people. So that is why we created this event. We did a lot of hard work to find a venue that would take us. We invited everyone and handled logistics. And I think that the people that did that did a wonderful job. And we invited Representative Tiberi. All he had to do was stop by to hear about our concerns before he repeals the ACA. This repeal could deprive 56,000 people just in our district from their health care. But will he get out of his comfort zone, his small meetings, to meet with all of us? No. Is Congressman Tiberi here? No. Well, it seems that Pat Tiberi isn't here. I did notice Representative David Leland here earlier. I'm not sure. So let's bring out Flat Pat, like Flat Stanley. Who will serve as our stand-in for Representative Tiberi tonight. Tonight, we are going to hear from those who will be impacted by the repeal of the ACA. This includes medical professionals and those who stand to personally lose the protections of the ACA. And then we'll open the floor to all of you to ask questions of Flat Pat or share your stories. So we encourage you all tonight to have fun. We're here with love in our hearts to try to save the ACA. Please tweet, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, whatever you all young people do. Just please use the hashtags of Where's Tiberi, Tiberi Town Hall, Indivisible OH, and Save ACA, so that those who are following along at home or in Knox County, who could that be, know what's going on. Up first is Dr. Beth Liston, who will be speaking about the ACA's impact from a physician's viewpoint.
I'm a doctor in Columbus. I've been taking care of adults and children who are sick for about a decade. I am not a paid protester. Truthfully, I've never really been involved in politics. I've learned so much from some of the people who've been fighting this fight for so long to bring health care and justice to people across the nation. So thank you, everyone, and thanks to the organizers who have set up this amazing event so that we can all speak out. I take care of adults and kids in the hospital, and I see firsthand the complications that people get when they don't have ability to access care, when they don't have insurance, so that they can come to the doctor and prevent those complications. About 2 weeks ago, I had an overnight shift, and the ER called me to come down and see a patient. She was here for something relatively simple, but had kidney failure and was on dialysis, so things were a little bit more complicated. When I went and saw her, I realized, wow, she was a young woman, and she was in her 30s, which is relatively uncommon in terms of patients that are on dialysis. But you see, she had diabetes. And she'd been diagnosed when she was young. And as a kid, she had access to health care. Her parents took her to the doctor. She was able to manage her blood sugars. But as she became an adult, she could no longer have access to care. She couldn't afford insurance. And as you know, diabetes is a pre-existing condition. And for her to pay out of pocket to manage her medical expenses would have been about $14,000 a year. Most people can't save enough money to pay $14,000 a year, even with a health savings account. So for a while, she volunteered at a free clinic. She had learned a lot about her illness and was trying to share that knowledge with others. And the free clinic gave her insulin. But over time, not having access to a doctor who can help her manage the insulin, not having access to the supplies that would allow her to check her blood sugar, took its toll. She got sick frequently, she was in the hospital, and over time, the toxicity from the high blood sugars hurt her kidneys until eventually they failed. At which point she was on dialysis, which costs about $100,000 a year instead of $14,000 a year. But I was hearing this story and I was talking to her and, somewhat heartbroken because I knew that we could have intervened, right? There were points at which, had she had insurance, her disease could have been managed. And now, her kidneys are gone. There's no coming back from that. But as I was thinking that and feeling heartbroken, her husband interjected, we are so grateful because the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, saved her life. And her life was getting back on track, but clearly she was petrified, and so was her husband, that was going to change, that she was going to lose her insurance, and she was going to lose her access with the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. Now, there are 964,000 Ohioans that would lose their health insurance with the Affordable Care Act repeal. 1 in 4 Ohioans have a chronic illness, right? So that's 250,000, or 250,000 Ohioans that are at risk in being in that same situation where they have complications that we could have prevented. Right? There are so many stories like this. I could tell you about the gentleman with a cough, who didn't want to risk bankruptcy or his ability to support his family by going to the doctor and getting some expensive tests. Right? So instead, he had to wait until it was an emergency. It got so bad that he came into the hospital. So now, when I saw him, instead of talking about how we can cure his cancer, we're talking about how much time he has left. Right? America needs a health care system, not a sick care system. Catastrophic insurance, paying only for emergency room visits, this does not keep us healthy, right? Ohio has a lot of health issues, right? We know that we're struggling with the opioid epidemic. 220,000 Ohioans gain access to mental health and addiction services with the Affordable Care Act. They may lose that. Infant mortality is a huge problem for our state, and here we are talking about taking away maternity care. So, the Affordable Care Act saves lives. It does this in the acute care, in the short term, where it lets people manage their chronic conditions before they develop complications to keep them healthy. And it does this in the long term by providing access to preventive services, things like vaccines, mammograms, colonoscopies, screenings, right? Access to things that we know save lives and keep people healthy. This is too important, right? This is not something that we can play politics with. We are all here to tell our stories, to speak out. I think myself, I can say I've been silent too long. And that's why we're here. We hope that Representative Tiberi hears us, that he hears the stories of myself, of Dr. Sumani, who's another physician who's going to be speaking, and all of the individuals here who are going to be personally impacted. And I invite everyone to share their stories as well. Everyone has postcards we've all going to fill out. And as I invite Dr. Sumani, who's also a physician in the area, to come talk about additional aspects, I'm going to put mine in the basket so that everyone else will do that soon as well.
Thank you, Beth. And I don't know if I can follow up with Beth's great speech there, but one of the things that I wanted to talk about is I also have been in practice in OBGYN here in Columbus, Ohio for 25 years, believe it or not. It's scary. And my daughter actually is in medical school, and I see these young medical students looking at the future that they have, and they get it. They get the idea that the Affordable Care Act will allow access to care. It'll allow these younger physicians to carry on what we've been doing for our patients. And it really, it hurts to see our congressmen, our congresspeople, Representative Tiberi, Representative Stivers, thinking of us as women who need to be barefoot and pregnant to turn back the clock. You look around, people like Melinda Gates, who understands that effective contraception, effective women's health, preventative care is what allows women to get out of poverty. We are a first world country. We are supposed to be one of the leaders in the free world. And when you look around and you see countries like Norway saying, we're contributing $10 million to the Global Health Fund so that women can access contraception, so women can have safe abortions. Abortion is actually safer than pregnancy. Most people don't realize that. But it is. Medically, it is safer. But again, our representatives want us to be barefoot and pregnant. And it's a shame when women comprise 51% of the United States, and these are the women who will allow society to be healthier for the next generation by providing good prenatal care, by allowing these women to have good nutrition, to have access to care. Can you imagine if you were denied coverage because you were a victim of domestic violence, or you had a health condition like breast cancer? And that's what happened before the ACA came about. We saw that every day. We saw women come to us, again, as Dr. Liston mentioned, delayed care, that delayed access to care because they couldn't afford to come in for their preventative screening. The ACA has allowed everybody to have that one free preventative visit a year. It's so important to take care of your health proactively, to be able to get that pap screening, to be able to get that mammogram, to be able to access effective contraception. And if you deny that, if you repeal the ACA, that extended coverage, which we got, actually extended coverage to 10 million women over 31 states. And the problem with that, and I mean, we all know it, we all see it, we see it in Ohio. We're in the bottom 10 of the 50 states when it comes to infant mortality. That's an embarrassment to OBGYNs like myself. And part of that has to do with access to care. If you live in a rural area where there are minimal physicians working in that area, your only access may be Planned Parenthood, it may be your neighborhood clinic. But again, Congress is attempting to block Medicaid funding to those clinics, to Planned Parenthood. Essentially, the Congressional Budget Office, which is a government funded office, nonpartisan, has estimated that 390,000 women would lose access to preventative and contraceptive services, and up to 650,000 would face reduced access to preventive care within a year. So when you look at that, that's appalling. I mean, we are looking at becoming a third world country when we think about things like preventative care, being able to serve medically underserved areas, for example, the south side of Columbus. That's an area you think about. Columbus is, we've got such wonderful healthcare systems. We have Ohio Health, we have Ohio State, we have Mount Carmel. But people on the south side, people on the hilltop are oftentimes unable to access that care because they don't have that clinic right in their neighborhood. So those are the things that we want to prevent from happening by preventing the repeal of the ACA. We've already seen what happens in areas like Texas, like Indiana, when preventative health care or access to care is shut down. 2014, 2015, then Governor Pence, you can boo him too, cut public health funding, and now Seema Varma, who is from Indiana, is looking at doing the same thing by making maternity coverage optional. So, yes. So guess what happened in Indiana? Normally, when you look at rural areas, when you look at Appalachia, HIV rates are very, very low. But what happened in Indiana is they had one of the largest and most rapid HIV outbreaks seen because of IV oxymorphone, because of sharing of needles, and then lack of access to STI screening. So that's a huge public health crisis, and that's a result of a cut in public funding. Texas, another place that's known for loving their women, and they excluded Planned Parenthood from a state program, which is what part of the ACA repeal would do. It would affect federal dollars going to Planned Parenthood. What happened in Texas is the number of births, number of pregnancies increased by 27%, and the number of women who were able to get effective contraception decreased by 35%. It's wrong on so many levels. So what I would ask of Pat Tiberi, what I would ask of Portman, of Stivers is, do we really want to see that happen in Ohio? You know, Dr. Liston spoke to the numbers that would be affected. Do we want women's health to deteriorate, to worsen because of lack of access or coverage? So guaranteeing access to women's health care leads to healthier babies through adequate prenatal care, fewer adverse birth outcomes, and better health throughout the reproductive years and beyond. So what we want to do, what I would like to see, and what I would hope everybody would speak to, is remind our representatives that we want healthy, productive people in Ohio. Not just women, but men. Ironically, Planned Parenthood provides preventative services to men also. You don't realize that, but it is a percentage of their care goes to men. It isn't about abortion. There was actually an amendment that prevented Medicaid dollars going to abortion. So all of the funding that goes to Planned Parenthood goes to preventative services. So when Paul Ryan talks about we're going to provide health savings accounts, those are tax shelters for people who can afford tax shelters. When they talk about access to care for everyone, but they'll have high-risk pools, that doesn't provide access to everybody. That just, yeah, those are buzzwords that are being thrown around by the Republicans, by the people who want to repeal the ACA. They talk about things like high-risk pools or Medicare vouchers. Well, right. When you think about that, it basically what it does is give that voucher to the person who has Medicare to then go find private insurance. Well, the private insurers are pulling out of that market, so it again affects your access to care as you get older. And as Dr. Liston mentioned, as I mentioned, as I feel strongly about, we want health care, not sick care. Fun facts in there. When you decrease contraceptive coverage, you also, one of the things that birth control does that most people don't know is that it reduces the risk for uterine cancer and ovarian cancer by anywhere from 50 to 80%, depending on how long you take it. So what better way to reduce the risk of cancer than by taking contraception? Unlike the arguments that and I love this term, so I'm going to use it, forced birthers, as opposed to anti-abortion people, they claim that abortions increase your risk for breast cancer. There is no data, there's no medical science to back that up. But there is medical science to back up the reduced risk of ovarian cancer and uterine cancer when it comes to using effective contraception. So again, I would also, with Dr. Liston, ask everybody to fill out postcards talking to Tiberi. If nothing else, we can get these to the office and share your stories. You know, my story comes from my perspective as a doctor, as a OBGYN, as a women's care advocate. But I think everyone in this room has a story to tell about their own health or a friend's health, or as Dr. Liston said, our patient's health. And thank you all for listening.
Intermission of the evening. So we don't want our actions to end with tonight. We want to make this the beginning and move forward with lots of actions. And the first one, the first action is the postcard action. So hopefully you grabbed a postcard on the way in. If you didn't, that's okay. We have more, and you can write your own postcard. What we'd like you to do is write a story or a question you have for Flat Pat. And then at the end of the evening, we will collect these and we will make sure that Representative Tiberi gets these. Now, if you didn't get a postcard or you've already filled yours out, we would also like to make it easier for you to call Representative Tiberi tomorrow or the next day. So I have a question. How many of you have added a contact to your cell phone? Raise your hand up real high. Okay, everybody who has never done that, look around and see the person who has their hand up, right? And what I would like for you all to do, those of you that have your cell phones with you, I want you to take just a moment. If you need help, you know there are people, raise your hands up again. Those of you that have done this, raise your hand up high. Add Representative Tiberi's phone numbers, all of them, to your contact list, and we'll take just a minute to do that and write out your postcard. Does anybody need a postcard up front?
From the audience.
And I would add that one of our Indivisible members designed those postcards. Is the designer here this evening? Raise your hand. Maybe not. Yes. I see lots of people still typing on their phone. Do you need another 30 seconds? Or are we ready?
Care Act because it saved my life. I was unable to get health care coverage because I'm a type 1 diabetic and have had diabetes since the age of 5. When I started to look for insurance coverage in the early 90s for my company's employees, many insurance companies would not even provide a quote because, as the owner, I had a pre-existing condition. I had to tell my staff that they had to buy health insurance on their own, and the company would pay 50% of their annual premium. After several years of this type of benefit, the company was getting bigger, and it was getting difficult to attract employees without group health insurance. So I tried again, and we were again turned down. So I asked the insurance companies to quote our group without me in the coverage pool. And we were finally able to get an insurance company to provide a quote. However, luckily for me, they made a mistake and inadvertently left me in the group when they provided the quote. Thanks to an existing Ohio law at the time, which stated that insurance companies were legally bound by their quotes and could not back out, I was finally able to get group health care insurance. The insurance company tried to back out of the coverage, and every year I was worried that the insurance would drop my company because of my condition. We were stuck with the one insurance company because they made a mistake and had to cover us, no matter how much they raised their premiums. I had to close my business in 2009. My husband also worked in my company, so now we were both unemployed and without insurance. This was pre-Obamacare, and I was getting quite a few phone calls about insurance coverage because insurance brokers stalk the unemployment lists online. All I had to say when they called was that I was a type 1 diabetic. Most of them hung up without another word. The only one who didn't hang up told me that if they did quote, it would be somewhere between $2,000 to $5,000 premium per month. My husband and I were on unemployment, so these costs were way more than we were getting every month, and that we spent on our mortgage and food. My pharmaceuticals, including insulin and insulin pump supplies, cost more than $1,200 a month. The insurance would not cover many of these costs. A friend of mine who was studying to be an actuary went over all the figures with me. She said that I should just pay for my pharmacy needs out of pocket, which was much less expensive than any insurance I might be able to get. She also explained that Ohio's hospitals cannot refuse to treat any person for emergency medical care if I or my husband needed hospitalization. Sadly, that was how many Ohioans were providing health care for their families pre-ACA. Lots of tears and lots of thinking only gave us one option: no insurance until the Affordable Care Act was passed. I even had some friends and neighbors who were supplying me with insulin pump supplies so we didn't have to buy them. We barely survived. When the Affordable Care Act was approved, I signed up right away. While it was a bit difficult to get through by phone, I finally managed to get someone. They were so kind, caring, and helpful. We got a tax abatement, which made our premium affordable. From my 2016 coverage to my current 2017 coverage, my payment for the Affordable Care Act only went up 6%. Only 6%. Representative Tiberi, do not continue to feed us alternative facts or unless you truly vet your information. During our meeting on February 13th, I met with Representative Tiberi. You told me that one of your constituents claimed that her premium and her deductible were too high due to the ACA. Did you vet her story? Perhaps she was not eligible for any tax relief because her household income was too high. Or maybe she had the choice of selecting a much better insurance policy with a different provider, but chose not to take that coverage. That would have been her choice, not the norm, and not the fault of the ACA. I owe my life to the Clintons. Clinton's, President Obama, and those who worked so hard on the Affordable Care Act. For health care for all Americans, no matter their income level or their health. Representative Tiberi, do not force us to go uninsured without coverage that helps us buy pharmaceuticals like insulin and syringes and pump supplies. These are necessities that keep us alive. Without this coverage, many of us may lose our lives. So I have one more important point to make. All of you in this town hall meeting that believe the American government should guarantee its citizens responsible and reasonable health care. Please remember those friends and family members who lost their lives because they didn't have or couldn't get appropriate health care coverage. Then remember that Representative Tiberi said he wouldn't come to a town hall meeting because people yell at him. And we deserve to be seen. So let's stand up loud enough and let's yell and make sure he knows why we're here and what a difference our voices can make. Tell me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Tell him what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Tell him what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Tell him one more time what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like. Who's here to tell you his story as well.
Good evening. I hope you don't mind. I want to address my comments to the congressman. Feel free to listen in. Congressman, my name is Bill Wood, and I'm self-employed. Like millions of other self-employed Americans, I get my health insurance through the exchanges created as part of the Affordable Care Act. And I'd like to give you an idea of what that's meant for me. For most of my career, I was an employee working for companies that provided me with health insurance. My wife and I knew that if we got sick, there would be some costs involved, but we always had insurance, so we never worried that those costs would bankrupt us. My opportunity to become self-employed came in December of 2007, right at the beginning of the Great Recession. I got laid off. I worked for this company for 25 years, and I was 55 years old. I can tell you that hiring prospects in that environment weren't really good. So, with a couple of other friends who had had the same opportunity as I had, I started a communications company, and we set about finding clients for our new business. That part actually went pretty well. But at the same time, my wife and I had to go out and shop for health insurance for the first time in our lives. We had a friend who worked in the insurance industry as a broker, and with his help, we filled out applications for a number of insurance companies. You don't get to your mid-50s without having some experience with doctors, but we really weren't worried because we thought we were basically healthy. At least that's what we thought. It turned out several of the companies we applied to had different ideas. Some wouldn't cover us at all. A few others would only offer us a policy that would cover everything except certain pre-existing conditions. Since those were the exact health areas that concerned us the most, that didn't seem like a very good deal. out of all the companies that we applied to, there was one, Mindy will relate to this, there was one that would insure us without any restrictions. That company offered a high deductible insurance policy, which meant that in a normal year, we were basically going to pay all of our own health care costs. But it would protect us from financial catastrophe, and we took it. We had that policy for 5 years prior to the Affordable Care Act. During that time, our insurance premiums increased 81%. Our deductibles went up 67%. I think about that a lot these days when people say that insurance costs have increased under the Affordable Care Act. This isn't exactly a new trend. Back then, we didn't have a choice when our rates increased. We knew this was the one and only company that would cover us. So we made sure that the insurance bill got paid on time every month. We didn't want to give them any excuse to drop us. Then the ACA exchanges opened in late 2013, and I went online to discover that we had 26 different insurance policies from 4 different companies, all of which were available to us, and all of which would cover us without exclusions for pre-existing conditions. After living for years knowing that we were one decision by one insurance company away from being uninsured, it was a little hard to comprehend that we were guaranteed coverage without restrictions from any of these companies, and they couldn't drop us if we got sick. We purchased a plan that was nearly identical to the one that we had already had at a cost that was hundreds of dollars less each month. Since then, yes, our premiums have gone up, but the total increase over the past 3 years has been less than what we faced annually under our private coverage before the ACA. Last November, I went on the exchange to shop for coverage for 2017. And I was concerned about premiums because people were talking about how there were these large increases. What I found was that the networks of doctors had narrowed somewhat, and we had to adjust to that. But I could still purchase a policy that covered my doctors and hospitals with a significant reduction in my deductible, and at costs slightly lower than last year. So, Congressman, I can tell you that the Affordable Care Act has worked exceptionally well for us. Our monthly our monthly health insurance bills are much lower, but more importantly, we have coverage we know we can count on. And there are millions of people like us who have gotten insurance through the healthcare marketplace, through the expansion of Medicaid, and through the ability of young people to stay on their parents' policies as they transition to adulthood. Is why healthcare reform matters. For us, the Affordable Care Act isn't a political or an ideological issue. It's something that is making a major difference in our lives. 8 years ago, in 2009, when the Affordable Care Act was being debated in Washington, a group of a dozen of us traveled to your local office to ask you for your support for a bill that we knew would matter to us. On that day, we were told you were too busy to see us. Now you and your Republican colleagues want to repeal the ACA, and apparently you're too busy to see us again. Recently, you've started saying that you're going to replace the Affordable Care Act with something much better. But honestly, Congressman, you've had 8 years to show us your better plan, and we've seen nothing. So what you're asking is that we trust you when it comes to our health care, and no, I'm not prepared to do that. The Affordable Care Act isn't perfect, but it has addressed exactly the concerns that we brought to you back in 2009. It has made affordable coverage, most of it through private insurance companies, available to millions of people who need it. And we deserve to know why you want to take away the health care we've worked so hard to get. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Mitch Lerner, who's going to tell you about his amazing kids.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Before I get started, let me first say thanks to everyone who helped put tonight's wonderful event together. And more than that, I want to thank all of you that are out in the audience. Thank you for coming tonight. I know that you're not here for me specifically, and that you all have your own healthcare stories that brought you here. But in the end, your presence and your enthusiasm and your activism here tonight in this hall and elsewhere might for some people be literally the difference between life and death. So thank you for coming. I'm not here to talk about us. I'm not here to talk about me even, at least not directly. I'm here to talk to you about my 3 kids, Camille, Julia, and Max. They're like everyone else's kids. They're into sports and movies and art and really terrible music that they play way too loud. They have boyfriends and girlfriends and pets, and they spend way too much time on their phones. And sometimes, frankly, they annoy the hell out of their parents. But here's what they have that most kids don't. My 3 kids have a total combined of 9 autoimmune diseases. Some of them aren't too bad, like the thyroid disease that both Max and Camille have. Some have their good days and bad days, like Max's rheumatoid arthritis. And some are just really awful all the time, like the type 1 diabetes that all 3 of them have. Type 1 diabetes, as you heard from Mindy, is a terrible disease. A constant balancing act of insulin and carbohydrates and blood tests that never, not even on a good day, let you forget for even a moment that you're always just one small step from potentially tragic consequences. God, so many of my memories as a parent are wrapped up in my kids' health. I remember those mornings when Max would lie in bed for an extra 10 minutes stretching his knees because of the arthritis so that he could walk to his bus stop without pain. I remember the night when Max was in 4th grade and another parent had brought in cookies for the class that day and he couldn't eat them because of his celiac disease. And when I tucked him in that night, he asked me, totally matter of fact, the way kids are. He asked me why he was so different from everyone else and why this had happened to him. And I remember when he was just a toddler. Max was just 1 year old when he was diagnosed with diabetes. And after dinner, sometimes I would prepare his insulin shot. And if he saw me, and at this age he knew like maybe 200-300 words, but if he saw me making the shot, he would ask if it was time for the herding. Time for me to hurt him. Try living with that in your memory banks as one of your kids' first sentences. Sorry. My kids and I don't want your sympathy. We don't need it. They're all doing great. They have good grades, and friends, and jobs, and activities. I told them from day one that this could never be an excuse, and that they would just sometimes have to work harder than other people to overcome these obstacles in front of them, but that they could and would overcome them. Julia was actually diagnosed with type 1 diabetes on September 11th, 2001. We were in the hospital the day everyone else was watching the towers fall. But I still get to tell her sometimes that she should consider herself lucky that she only has diabetes, because a lot of people didn't make it home to see their families at all that day. And so I have watched with incredible pride as they have overcome failing pancreases and broken thyroids and arthritic knees and horribly flawed autoimmune systems to emerge as the smart, successful, well-adjusted kids that they are today. But the incredible irony is that the one obstacle they might not be able to overcome isn't related to their body's failures, it's related to the failures of our political system, which has somehow put petty partisan politics ahead of the well-being of America's children. I'm lucky. I have good health insurance through my employer, but even then, the financial costs of these diseases are staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars when you add in what I pay and what my insurance company pays. And that means that for years I've lived with the fear, always nagging at me in the back of my mind, of what would happen to my kids when they turned 21 and finished college and could no longer be on my plan. Or worse, what if something happened to me and they no longer had access to my insurance? What would happen to them? A single vial of their insurance costs over $300, and my kids go through roughly 10 of them every month. Without insulin, they die. But no company's going to offer insurance to a family like mine, who is virtually a walking all-you-can-eat buffet of pre-existing conditions. And then came the Affordable Care Act. And since then, I've been able to sleep just a little bit better, knowing that no matter what happened to me and no matter what happened to them, the government had ensured that my kids would have access to the medicine that kept them alive. And now they want to take that away. To tell my children that here in one of the richest, most advanced nations in the world, their lives might once again be in jeopardy because those life-saving medical supplies, which are produced in massive quantities and lying around in every drugstore in America, might not be available to them because they can't afford it without insurance, but they can't get insurance because of their pre-existing conditions. I'll tell you, I don't agree with everything that President Obama ever did, but that moment when he passed that law, that single moment, that one law, that will be with me forever. Because when he signed that law, he didn't defeat our diseases, but he ensured that we'd be able to keep fighting for as long as it took to defeat them ourselves. To him, for that, I will be eternally grateful. In 2011, my family was honored for the advocacy work that we do by being invited by the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation to participate in a lobbying campaign they run every other year in Washington, D.C. My kids, along with about 100 others from across the nation, came to D.C. for a few days to meet with various elected officials to talk about the struggles that they face on a daily basis. The theme of the campaign that year was called A Promise to Remember Me. And the officials who met with their constituents that year received a nice plaque and a great photo op with the children, in return for which they promised to remember those brave kids when they made future decisions about health care. I have with me a photo from that day. These are my kids with Congressman Pat Tiberi in his Washington, D.C. office, presenting him with a thank you plaque and asking him to remember them. Congressman Tiberi shook my hand that day, and he looked me in the eye, and he promised that he would indeed remember them. The moment of truth is now. History is watching. His constituents are watching. and my kids are watching, desperately hoping that he will prove to be a man of his word, that he will put people before politics, that he will put lives before lobbyists, that he will put children, my children, before campaign contributions, and that he will indeed uphold that promise to remember them like he said he would. Congressman, when you break it all down, lives depend on it, they depend on you, and they depend on all of you. So again, let me thank you for your help, thank you for everything you've done, and urge you to keep fighting. Thank you. Who can tell you about her experiences, both with and without health care. Thank you.
Hi. I am Julie Stevens, and I live in Worthington. I'm a real person who really lives here. For 10 years, my family had no health insurance. From the time I was 6 until the time I was 16. Having no health insurance was a way of life. My parents protected me from it as much as they could. My sister and I went to our checkups, went to urgent care if we needed to, but my parents didn't. They would suffer through illnesses silently. A cloud hangs over your head. What if? Not just what if I get sick, but what if I can't afford to get better again? Illnesses that have 6- and 7-figure price tags are too common, and they happen to us. We had to pay cash for everything, including my mom's months-long stay in the ICU and several surgeries for an illness that she still has today, and I still have to watch her make decisions on what medications to take based on how much they're going to cost her. She recovered for which I'm thankful every day, but the bills that came for years after that were like another illness. Those bills changed all of our lives, and we were lucky that we could pay them at the start. I have asthma, and when I got bacterial pneumonia in 7th grade, my pediatrician offered to see me in his office every day for 2 weeks, rather than send me to the hospital due to the expense. My lips turned blue, and I couldn't walk up the stairs. I still have a scar in my lungs from it. Inhalers were more expensive than the same drugs delivered by a loud, heavy machine that I had to take everywhere as a preteen. Had to use at sleepovers, in people's closets, in park ranger stations, rest stop bathrooms. We had to plug it in to fight off an asthma attack. I still have that pre-existing condition. Once I cut my finger wide open doing the dishes, and a family friend who was a doctor came back to his office after hours to see me and close it instead of me going to the emergency room. When your health care relies on kindness and charity, there's no security. There's only a series of small emergencies punctuated by nervous silence. Representative Tiberi promised me, we're not going backwards. But the plans the current Congress has put forward will take away some people's insurance and put living, surviving, out of reach financially for some of us. I have made having good health insurance a priority since I finally got insured at age 16. And now that I have a son, I know I can never let him go without reliable, secure health care. The only reason my own family today has good, affordable health insurance is because of the ACA's employer mandate. I am part of the ever-growing gig economy, as a freelance copy editor. My husband has a good job as a researcher, but until the employer mandate of the ACA went into effect, his employer did not allow employees in his job category to join the insurance plan. With reasonable premiums, low deductibles, and no charge for routine preventive care. I took my 3-year-old son to get his vaccines at no cost this year, and reading the heartbreaking news about 5 children in Ohio dying of the flu this month has made me grateful that I did not even have to consider the cost of that appointment. The employer mandate of the ACA requires large employers to offer good, affordable insurance to their full-time employees. Its full implementation was delayed until 2016, and we know how terrible the job market is right now, right? Really ruined it. The replacement plans offered by Republicans so far all repeal the employer mandate. I do not know if I will be able to keep our insurance if it is repealed. We cannot and must not go backwards.
I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, to my father, who was a lineman for General Motors until his retirement, and my mother, who was a small business and restaurant owner. At the age of 11, I was diagnosed with ALL, which is a type of leukemia. And fortunately, because of the United Auto Workers Union, I was covered completely. Even though my father had passed away, and we were just receiving survivorship benefits. In 2008, I found out I was sick again, after being in remission from the age of 14 to 19. I was actually being seen at the Broad Street Planned Parenthood in Columbus for a routine screening. When they did some lab work on me and a blood test, and it came back with extremely elevated white blood cells. They sent me to a specialist, and lo and behold, I now had a new form of leukemia caused by the radiation from my previous cancer. Luckily, I was enrolled full-time at OSU and therefore covered by my parents' insurance. But in 2010, in my third year of school at OSU, after having lived in Columbus since 2006, I found out that I was no longer going to be able to be a full-time student at OSU, and then I was no longer going to have insurance. I spent 1 year and 8 months without insurance, while in the middle of an intense treatment plan for leukemia. I was unable to be insured through my work, where I worked full-time and made $24,700 a year because that was too much for government insurance for a single-person household in Ohio. In that same amount of time, 1 year and 8 months, I had racked up over twice the amount of debt I did as a full-time student in 4 years of college. $68,000. The medicine that I was taking 3 times a day, 400 milligram tablet called Gleevec, cost me $10,761.08 for a 30-day supply. To give you a little bit of something to chew on, today with the ACA, I pay $28 a month for that pill. Without that life-saving medication, my doctors gave me 3 months to live, and at one point I was down to 120 hours. A classmate, through some sort of cosmic blessing, is very closely connected to Richard Solove. And you may or may not know that name, but if you drive down 315, you see the James Cancer and Richard Solove Research Institute. Because of the generosity of Richard Solove, his daughter and grandson, and the James Cancer Hospital, I was able to receive my treatment from my doctors and lab work and anything I needed free except for my medications. I was denied health care through every employer because of my pre-existing condition before the ACA. And I continue to take an expensive cocktail of medication every day, even though that I have been cancer-free since 2013. If I were to go off these meds, it would be less than a year before my cancer would come back in full force. And I'd be in an accelerated blast crisis, which is a fancy word for meaning that my white blood cells would eat all my other cells, and they would think I was so sick that I would sick myself to death. And even though I'm in remission, I am constantly in danger of not having those life-saving medications, which there are now generics for, which means that if I were to get off of my insurance and pay out of pocket for the generic version, I would pay $4,732 a month. Yeah. So not only does the ACA make my costs less, but my pre-existing condition is not a deal breaker anymore. Today, I am 28 years old, I am married, I'm a homeowner, and I'm interested in starting a family, but I'm terrified because if they repeal the ACA, not only could I possibly leave a child without a mother, both my husband and my parents are deceased. I can't do that to a family. But they also risk taking away any type of prenatal and maternity care. And it's irresponsible for me to think about being a mother, which is all I've ever wanted to do with my entire life. For our congresspeople and senators to think that they have the right to dictate what I deserve as a human, as a woman, as an American is atrocious. It's sinful. It's detestable. This land said we had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that means the right for your children to have the opportunity to fight for themselves. For you, anybody here with their own health conditions, the opportunity to get up the next morning and have a chance to pursue happiness. And it's your responsibility and the responsibility of all of our elected officials to be our voice. And I look around here and I see a lot of voices that don't agree with you. And I thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me share my story and keep fighting.
So our next action intermission, we'll take a break, and then we're going to pull the microphones out and get some more stories and questions. I know we're running behind, so I hope you all will stay with us for a little bit longer. Our next action intermission is for you all to take a little social media break. We'd like to have a Twitter burst, Facebook burst of activity. So if you could make a tweet, Facebook, WhatsApp, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever. Tell your friends and family. If you're not on social media, maybe text, phone call. And we're going to start taking questions from the audience. They can be questions of Flat Pat or more stories. We'll go for about 10 minutes and then we'll hear from John Russell. Oh, and if you have postcards, please kind of pass them to the middle so that the ladies with the baskets can collect them from you, and we'll make sure that Representative Tiberi gets them. And if anybody would like to take a selfie with Flat Pat, feel free to come up.
It's kind of flat. That's okay.
So if anyone is at a microphone and would like to ask a question of Flat Pat or tell a story, I think in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and do that while we're social media breaking and doing selfies with Pat. So if you're out with the microphones and would like to start, please do.
Sarah. I did my first live feed.
Who's trying to get it?
All right, so we're going to listen to some more stories and questions, so if I could ask you all to just be a little quiet and respectful of the serious stories that we're going to be hearing.
Very visionary act that has helped so many people in this entire country, and has helped me as well. In December of 2015, I came down with a very severe case of pneumonia and was hospitalized for 5 days. During that time, my COBRA coverage was canceled, and I was not aware of this until I was out of the hospital. My premium had arrived five days late due to the fact that I was ill. Had it not been for the anti-rescission clause where it says that insurance cannot be canceled capriciously and without 30 days notice, I would have been stuck with a $30,000 hospital bill. As it was, my insurance was reinstated and my COBRA covered it. In December of 2016, my COBRA ended. I now have ACA coverage at 1/3 the cost of my COBRA coverage. And it's $800 deductible. So $150 a month and an $800 deductible. I have insurance that I can afford, and it has taken the worry off my back that I had for so long when I thought COBRA would eventually end and I wouldn't know what to do. But right now, with Pat Tiberi, I want to tell him that we must keep the Affordable Care Act. Thank you.
Good evening, Flat Pat, Mr. Tiberi. I'm here to say to you what I was going to say last time we saw each other, and I am glad that you finally get to hear my voice, even though we have spoken seeing each other, at least in the same room for an hour. So I'm a child of two entrepreneurs, two self-employed people who started a business when I was a child, long before the Affordable Care Act was passed. For most of that time, I therefore did not have health care insurance. You didn't get insurance because you needed it. At that time, I'm not sure if you remember Mr. Tiberi, but insurance was something you got because you could afford to have it, not because you needed it. So, during all of that time as my parents started a business to provide for their families, my father was getting sicker, and we got to muddle through. We had to ignore the increasing complaints about how he was feeling until eventually he had to take on a second job, working at a hospital nights, because I don't know if you know this about entrepreneurs, but they work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And a few months after we did finally get coverage back, because my father was now literally working almost 24-hour days, I woke up to a morning that I will never forget, even if I try, which I have, to find both of my parents missing. My sister and I were unable to find them, and we went through the entire day not knowing that my father had been on borrowed time for quite a while. It is only because of the quick actions of my mother that he was saved by a team of wonderful doctors at Emory. But you seem to want to take us back to a place where children wake up to find that their lives have changed forever. And I don't know why that seems to be okay for you, why the convenience of some can outweigh the lives of any. But I am not willing to go back. And I would have said this to you in person if I had the chance to speak. So I'm saying it.
I was not able to benefit from good insurance. I was either underinsured or uninsured. I was not able to benefit from Medicaid when I needed it because I was considered to be an able-bodied individual who could work. So when the ACA was passed and the Ohio Medicaid expansion was installed, I was able to have my hearing loss surgically corrected so that I could continue to go out and pursue what I needed to pursue and do what I needed to do for myself as someone with much better hearing. When I was not insured, I was actually given a list of social services or clinics that would help. It was 6 pages, and this is a city that is 1 million people. We have a very small social network to help people who are struggling to provide health care for themselves. So my question for Pat Tiberi is that if Medicaid returns to its old version for people who are not able to work, how are you going to define able-bodied? And also, how do you define cruelty?
My name is Sophie. I'm 17 and I'm from Powell. In 2007, my mom was diagnosed with a rare form of liver cancer, and she ended up having to have almost half of her liver removed. The surgery alone cost more than $80,000. As a small business, self-insured, my parents' insurance coverage became a nightmare. They were trapped into a high premium plan it could not change because of my mom's pre-existing condition. This was well before the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act changed that for us. Pat Tiberi, you have an opportunity that few get. You have the opportunity to lift people up. The ACA needs to be fixed, not repealed. If repealed, it will leave people like 20 million people like my mom without coverage. Do you realize that you're playing politics with literal lives?
But it's still something that I think people still face every day. After 30 plus years in the field of social work, I retired and I traveled to Tanzania to do some volunteer work. While there, I fell and I damaged my knee. When I returned to the United States in 2014, I was 64 and not yet eligible for Medicare. I was, however, eligible through the Affordable Care Act for the Medicaid expansion. This insurance was invaluable in providing me access to the medical care I needed, x-rays, physical therapy, etc. Recently, Governor Kasich stated he won't, quote, sit silent and watch the ACA's Medicaid expansion get, quote, ripped out as Republicans work to repeal the law. Kasich said, that is a very, very bad idea because we cannot turn our back on the most vulnerable. My question, Congressman Tiberi, is a simple yes or no. Will you support Governor Kasich's position on Medicaid expansion? And in conclusion, respectfully, I would like to remind you of three things. One, you are a public servant. And number two, Article 25 of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, made in 1948, states everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, medical care, and necessary social service. And last but not least, health care is not a policy issue, it is a moral issue.
More questions after John gives us our call to action.
Hey everybody! All right, how we doing? That's right. Anybody out there fired up? You ready to go? All right, good. What do you think, Flat Pat? Silent smiling as usual. I'm John Russell. That was way too much credit for starting this thing. I just put a petition up online. It's something anybody here could do, and I encourage you to. I'm a farmer in Galena, and last year I ran for state representative. Thank you. And by the way, slate of speakers here, you all should run for office because that, honestly, that's very, very good. We ended up hitting 16,000 doors. I lost a couple of pounds and I wore through a couple of sets of shoes. You guys probably know me better, though, as the guy holding the giant invitation there. And delivering it to one very concerned staffer, if you could put it that way, for Congressman Tiberi. Okay, we have... This has been an incredible program. It is amazing to see you guys out here. Thank you for coming. I want to do this thank you thing, all right? So you ready? When I point at you, everybody's going to say yes. So ready? Yes! Okay, so thank you. So let's get through this. First Unitarian Church. Yes! The Mid-Ohio Food Bank. Yes! The nurses who screened for healthcare today. Yes! The citizens who put together this event. Yes! And most importantly, you. Yes! That's right. You're the most important. Look around this hall. Look around this hall, and you're going to be looking at the people who run this country. It's up to us. Stand here. And that's all. That's what I want to focus on today. There's one thing that I want you to remember, and it's as you leave here today. As you leave here today, don't forget about the power of a single person with persistence to make great things happen. We talk about resisting, but just as important, we have to persist. And along those lines, I read a story recently, and it was in Vox, and maybe some of you saw it. And it was about a woman who told her story, who was incredibly persistent, ended up changing the American healthcare system. Her name was Barbara. She had a son named Jack, who was 12 years old. He had hemophilia and medical bills worth $30,000 every month. And before the Affordable Care Act, before that passed, there were caps on coverage, for lifetime caps on coverage. And that meant that the care that Jack counted on was going to dry up at $2 million. If you do the math on that, that was not enough time to give him a chance to get through high school without a serious crisis. There was nothing special about Barbara, except persistence and getting to work and keeping at it every day. She wrote and she called and she visited her senator. Maybe some of you know what that feels like. And she kept at it. And day by day she did this for years. She built a personal relationship. She made it about personal stories. She delivered to her senator, Senator Dugan from Nebraska, copies of Jack's medical bills. And, all of her story was simple. It focused on a simple question. Is this the best that we can do in America, this situation? And now we're going to have to ask that today and going forward. Is this the best that we can do? Well, it changed the senator's mind. Later on, Senator Dugan became the driving force behind banning lifetime caps on care that gave Jack a chance through the Affordable Care Act. And that's what's on the table today. That's what we're out there fighting for. And that's what we have to defend. So when somebody asked the senator why he cared so much about lifetime caps, you know what he said? He said it was because of Barbara and Jack. Two ordinary people with extraordinary persistence. So when we leave here today, everybody, there will be wins and losses. Things will come our way. Pat will not show up. But we're going to keep up the pressure. Small amounts, day by day, year after year. And together we're going to have the power to make this nation what we all know it to be. That's what we have to do when we leave here. So, it starts right after you walk out the doors. There's a couple of actions I'd like to urge everybody to take. And maybe now this is the time to cue up the PowerPoint, whoever controls it. Here we go. Number one, join the group if you haven't yet, and bring a friend. Just a single friend. Email subscribe just like that up to that address. And you can get onto the email list. Slowly and steadily, we're going to build up the people power needed to win elections, to run this government, and to stop the silliness. Second, what do we have? Look at that. Amplify. Amplify what others have shared. Through your personal story, you can change the minds of the people who are making these decisions. And whenever you see somebody share that, the best success that we've had is when other people jump on and boost it and amplify it and tell a friend. So, When you tweet, use those hashtags. If you search for those hashtags, you can see everything that people have been tweeting tonight and retweet it or post about it on Facebook and share it or email it or write it down on a postcard and deliver it to a congressman that isn't here. What's the third thing? Visit Tiberi with us. Like, we have postcards, and we will be delivering the mail to Congressman Tiberi's office tomorrow. And I urge all of you to join us. Right up there is the time. 23rd? The 23rd. Important note. It may be raining, but like the United States mail, neither rain nor sleet nor dark of night will stop our delivery to Congressman Tiberi. Fourth. Do we have a fourth? The Indivisible Columbus Group is holding an event Monday, March 6th for Rob Portman. Do we have a flat Rob?
He's next.
And the date. What day do we have?
Thursday, the 23rd.
The 23rd, yes, the 23rd. And on March 6th is the Portman event. Indivisible Columbus, where are you? There's somebody organizing this. 37 West Broad, his office, and we'll have a follow-up post on the group Facebook site. Any more? What's that? There we go. Portman's date, March 6th. We'll be posting about that on the Facebook, and it's probably at his office too.
Sorry, the Portman Memorial is here. That's
In the church.
The 6th, and wear black because it's a memorial.
You all heard it. While Mia is finding this out, there's one final thing that I want to urge you to do, and it's simple. Make yourself into a one-person force for change. That's right. Go out there and look about the things that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to win a lot of elections. We're going to have to keep up the pressure on the Affordable Care Act. We're going to have to organize into neighborhood groups and precinct captains and bring in more people. And don't wait on somebody else to do it. In the words of a great president, you are who you've been waiting for. Thank you, everybody. For the Portman Memorial, 7 p.m. here on the 6th. Wear black, everybody. Great to see you.
Official program, but if you would like to continue to stay and ask Flat Pat more questions or take a selfie with him, please feel free.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for coming. All your senators and representatives.
I've got a question for everybody here. I'm going to go from District 3, and yesterday I met with my representative who was speaking. Okay? If you read, and I did, you find that in poll after poll, 70% of people want to keep what the ACA has promised. You also read that there are people, probably the ones who get their news from Fox News alone, who don't believe that Obamacare and the ACA are the same thing. How are we going to educate? How are we going to educate? Because those people are our natural allies if they understood the truth and not the alternative facts.
Okay.